So you guys probably know the movies Frozen and Frozen 2, but do you know the original story that inspired them? It's The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, and it's actually an incredible story which is split into like 7 parts. And I decided to make a video about them where I basically summarized this story. And I would still urge you to go and read these stories yourselves as well, because it's just an incredible story and I really, really like it. So the first story is called Which Treats of a Mirror and of the Splinters. Okay, so it's basically about these wicked sprites who have a mirror that reflects everything in its most negative form, you could say, and they fly to the sky with the mirror. Well, they try to, but the mirror falls to Earth, where he crashes into more than 100 million pieces, which fly all across the world and can get into people's eyes, so that they say everything in its most negative form, because these pieces still have the same powers as the whole mirror did. And when they get into your heart, it can turn into a lump of ice. Then we get to the second story, which is called A Little Boy and a Little Girl. It basically tells us of this little boy and this little girl who are as close as siblings, and their parents lived in front of each other. They were called Kai and Gerda, and one winter evening we are told that Kai was watching the snowflakes from his window until the biggest one grew into a woman made of ice who started nodding towards the window, and so Kai jumped away out of fear. Time passes and summer came, where the kids were spending time outside, until Kai got a piece of this magical mirror into his eye and his heart, so that he starts acting really negatively. He starts insulting Gerda, and then time passes where everyone thinks he's really intelligent for pointing out all these negative things, but he's really just corrupted by this magical mirror. And as winter arrives, he goes to drive his sledge, where he meets the Snow Queen again, and they stop, and she puts him in her sledge, where she kisses him on the forehead so that he's no longer freezing due to her presence, and then gives him another kiss so that he forgets about everyone he knew and starts seeing her as perfect. Then they leave and fly away to the moon, basically. Now we get to the third story, called Of the Flower Garden at the Old Woman's Who Understood Witchcraft. No one knew where Kai was, and Gara was just incredibly upset because he was as close to her as her brother. And when spring arrives, Gerda comes to the conclusion that he must have passed away, only to have the sunshine, the literal sunshine, disagree with her. And so she goes to a river and gets into a boat in an attempt to search for Kai. She thinks the river has gotten him, and she tries to sacrifice her shoes. However, all that does is lead her boat to travel away, and now she's alone in the sea and lets the river carry her, hoping that she would somehow find Kai. An old lady comes out of her cottage and lifts Gerda out, who tells her everything, and so she takes her into the cottage, where she brushes Gerda's hair with a golden comb that gets her to forget about Kai and about everything of her own life, because she wants to keep Gerda, who starts playing in her garden for a bunch of days, until she notices roses on the head of the old lady, which remind her of her own roses in her garden, and so she's reminded of Kai as well, and leaves. Outside, she recognizes that autumn has already arrived, and she starts questioning how long it must have been since she's been with that old lady. And here we arrive at the fourth story, The Prince and the Princess. Gerda is resting when a raven arrives, and she tells him everything about her issues, and he tells her that he might have seen Kai. He tells her about the princess who was looking for a husband, and on the third day a guy arrives with similar eyes to Gerda, long hair, and shabby clothes. They both believe that it was Kai, so they go to the palace of the princess with the help of the raven's lover, and in the bedroom she sees the princess and the prince, only to realize that the prince was actually not Kai. When they wake up, she tells them what happened to her and they feel sympathy for her, so that the prince lets her sleep in his bed. And the next day, they get her like these really nice clothes and a carriage with which she can leave to go looking for Kai again. And then we get to the fifth story called The Little Robber Maiden. There were a bunch of robbers who were watching her and then pulled her out of a carriage. They wanted to take her life, but then the daughter of a female robber jumps in and she basically says that she wants her as her playmate. So they get into the carriage together and drive away, where Gerda basically tells her everything that has happened so far. And they stop at the courtyard of the robber's castle, where the girl falls asleep, and the wood pigeons tell Gerda that they know where Kai is and tell her what happened to him, that he's in Lapland and she needs to travel there because the Snow Queen has taken him. The next day she tells the robber maiden about this, who decides to help her and asks a reindeer if he knows how to get to Lapland, which he does, and so she makes sure that everyone is gone and her mother is sleeping, and then tells the reindeer to take her to Lapland. And so the reindeer and Gerda travel to Lapland until they arrive there. And then we get to the sixth story called The Lapland and the Finland Woman. They stop for a little house where we have the Lapland woman, and she tells them that they need to go to the Finland woman and gives her a note to give to the Finland woman. They arrive there and the house is described as really hot, so that she needs to put ice on the reindeer, the Finland woman. She needs to put ice on the reindeer and tells them that Kai has this glass in his eyes and his heart, which must be removed. And so they leave again to the castle, and the reindeer runs really quick and lets Gerda go. Now she needs to go to the palace alone, and the reindeer kisses her goodbye. As she tries to get into the palace, there are living snowflakes, and she's so desperate that she starts to pray, and through her prayer, she's suddenly surrounded by a bunch of angels who fight the snowflakes so that she can go peacefully to the palace. Then we get to the seventh story, what took place in the palace of the Snow Queen and what happened afterward. This is the last story. And here we meet Kai again. He was laying together pieces of ice in all possible ways, trying to make a representation for the word eternity, because the Snow Queen promised him that she would be gifted the whole world and a pair of skates and could be his own master. The Snow Queen leaves for a while, and then Gerda enters and hugs Kai. She starts crying, and her tears taught the lumps of ice that were basically his heart and consume the glass. And she cries and then he cries till the eye is like free of the glass, and he recognizes her. The ice dances in happiness, yes, the ice that he was trying to lay down, and then lays down in the form of eternity. She then kisses him until he is completely back to normal, and they leave together and arrive at home, where there's their grandma, and they live happily ever after. I really, really like the story. I just think it's such a fun adventure. Like I said, I would urge you to still read it, even though I just summarized it. Still, it's worth a read. And yeah, I hope you have a nice day. I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye!